A man suffered a serious heart attack while shopping in a store. The store clerk called 911 when they saw him collapse to the floor. The paramedics rushed the man to the nearest hospital, where he had emergency open-heart bypass surgery. He awakened from the surgery to find himself in the care of nuns at the Catholic hospital. A nun was seated next to his bed, holding a clipboard loaded with several forms and a pen. She asked him how he was going to pay for his treatment. She asked. He replied in a raspy voice, "No health insurance." The nun asked, "Do you have money in the bank?" He replied, "No money in the bank." "Do you have a relative who could help you with the payments?" asked the irritated nun. He said, "I only have a spinster sister, and she is a nun." The nun became agitated and announced loudly, "Nuns are not spinsters. Nuns are married to God." The patient replied, "Perfect. Send the bill to my brother-in-law." A man goes to his doctor complaining about migraines. His doctor tells him, "I also suffer from the same ailment. Every time I get one, I give my wife oral sex. When she has an orgasm, she tightens her legs around my head, which gets rid of the pain. You should try it sometime." 2 weeks later, on a return visit, the patient tells his doctor, "Your suggestion worked, and I'd like to tell you that you have a very nice house." "I found out that my best friend was sleeping with my wife, and I even saw him taking her to the bar we first met at. So, in retaliation, I spent a month painting my fence and house, sanded my patio, and waxed my car, just like Mr. Miyagi taught Daniel in The Karate Kid. After this, I finally confronted them both to win her back. He beat me up and stole my wallet and keys to my house." A judge was interviewing a South Carolina woman regarding her pending divorce and asked, "What are the grounds for your divorce?" "About 4 acres and a nice little home in the middle of the property with a stream running by." "No," he said. "I mean, what is the foundation of this case?" "It is made of concrete, brick, and mortar," she responded. "I mean," he continued, "what are your relations like?" "I have an aunt and uncle and 12 cousins living here in town, as well as my husband's parents." The judge took a deep breath and asked, "Do you have a real grudge?" "No, we have a 2-car carport, and I've never really needed one because we don't have a car." "Please," he tried again, "is there any infidelity in your marriage?" "Yes, both my son and daughter have stereo sets. We don't necessarily like the music, all that hip-hop and rap tap, but we can't seem to do anything about it." "Ma'am, does your husband ever beat you up?" "Yes, he gets up every morning before I do and makes the coffee." The judge asked, "Is your husband a nagger?" "Oh, hell no, he's as white as you and me." Finally, in frustration, the judge asked, "Lady, why in hell do you want a divorce?" "Oh, I don't want a divorce," she replied. "I've never wanted a divorce. My husband does. The damn fool says he can't communicate with me." A couple goes to marriage counseling for one last effort to save their marriage. The counselor asks what the main problem seems to be. "We disagree on everything. We basically have nothing in common." The counselor thinks for a second and says, "Well, this is easy enough. Let's find something that you both have in common." The husband pipes up, "Well, neither of us sucks dick." A Catholic priest is drowning in the ocean. A lifeguard swims past and asks the priest, "Do you need help?" Priest replies, "Don't worry. God will save me." A few minutes go by and another lifeguard swims past. He says, "Here, grab my hand. I can help you get back to shore." Priest replies, "Never fear. God will save me." A few more minutes go past and the priest is really struggling. A fishing boat comes along and they ask, "Do you need help? Climb aboard. We can help you." Again, the priest replies, "I have faith. God will save me." Priest drowns and goes to heaven. He meets God and asks, "Why, God? I have been a devout Catholic. Why did you not save me?" God replies, What are you talking about? I sent you 2 lifeguards and a boat. Little Johnny is sitting on the couch watching TV next to his elderly grandmother. After a few minutes of sitting down, he looks over and realizes that his grandma fell asleep. But before she did, she pulled her nightgown up over her head so that everything below her neck is hanging out. Little Johnny runs to the kitchen to tell his mom, "Mommy, Mommy, Grandma fell asleep again, and her shins are hanging out. Her shins are hanging out." Mom, knowing what happened as it has happened before, says to Johnny, "How many times do I have to tell you, Johnny? Just like you have your boy part called a penis, Grandma has a girl part, and it is called a vagina, not shrimps." Little Johnny looks at his mom in all seriousness and says, "I don't care what you call it, Mom. It tastes like shrimp to me." A Catholic priest visits Japan. One day, he goes to a bar and the bartender, who speaks English quite well, asks, "Hold on, you're a priest. Why are you here?" The priest answers, "I have been asked by the Lord himself to give him your finest rice wine." The bartender is a little confused, but nonetheless gives the paying customer what he asks for. The next day, the priest visits the same bar but sees another bartender. This bartender, who also speaks English, asks, "Hold on, you're a priest. Why are you here?" Again, the priest answers, "I have been asked by the Lord himself to give him your finest rice wine." This bartender is also confused, but nonetheless gives the paying customer what he asks for. The next day, the priest goes to the bar yet again and sees yet another bartender. As usual, the new bartender asks, "Hold on, you're a priest. Why are you here?" Having lost his patience and become irate, the priest yells, "For God's sake!" A guy shows up at the gates of heaven. St. Peter prepares to welcome the man, but before St. Peter can greet him, the man walks away. A few moments later, the exact same thing happens. This repeats itself a couple of times before St. Peter angrily asks, "For God's sake, are you going to come in or not?" The man, walking away yet again, responds, "I can't help it. They're reanimating me." Little Johnny is in school one day when his teacher tells the class that she wants to hear each of them say a little about their families and specifically what is needed in their lives. The first student is a little girl. She stands up and says, "My family is mostly happy, but what we really need is a bit more money. My dad leaves for work before I am even awake, and he works hard until late at night to put food on the table. Money is needed in my family. More time with my dad is needed." The teacher is moved. She thanks the student and moves on to the next. A little boy stands up and says, "All we are missing in my family is my older brother. He went off to fight in the war a year ago, and nobody has heard from him since. My mom always waits for him by the window. My brother is desperately needed back in our family." The teacher is now tearing up. She thanks the little boy and moves on to the next student, eventually making their way around the classroom with one heartfelt response after another. Finally, they come to the last student, little Johnny. The teacher has come to expect antics from him, but gives him a chance. "Little Johnny, what about you? What is something needed by your family?" Little Johnny stands up briefly and says, "Nothing. We have everything," and sits back down. The teacher, slightly upset, asks, "Now how is that possible? Each of your classmates has shared something. How can you be so sure that your family doesn't need a thing?" Little Johnny stands back up and says, "Well, I was watching TV with my parents late last night when my sister came home crying. She said, 'Dad, please don't be mad at me, but I am pregnant.' My dad disappointingly slapped his knee and said, 'Damn it, that's all we needed.' All." The employee calls his boss to tell him he can't come in for work today because he is sick. The boss tells the employee, "Whenever I get sick, I have sex with my wife. Maybe try that." Later that day, the employee calls his boss and says, "Thanks for the tip. I feel so much better now. Also, you have a nice house." A man is planning his vacation. As he does so, a friend swings by and offers to help. "Hey man, may I suggest the Maldives? Had an amazing time there. I'm not taking any advice from you. Back in '98, you suggested Rome. I went there, and my wife got pregnant. In 2007, you suggested Brazil. I went there, and my wife got pregnant. Then in 2013, you suggested France, and guess what? My wife got pregnant again. Well, that's not my fault. You should just start taking your wife with you." There was once a blind Finn, a deaf Dane, and a Swede who was in a wheelchair. They found a bottle whose spirit promised everyone a wish. The Finn wished first and soon yelled, "I can see! I can see!" Then the Dane wished and soon yelled, "I can hear! I can hear!" Then the Swede wished and soon he yelled, "New tires! New tires!" An old man finds a condom in his grandson's apartment and asks what it is. "It's a condom," replies the grandson sheepishly. "What do you use it for?" asks Grandpa. The grandson is embarrassed, so he says, "I use it to keep my cigarettes dry when I smoke in the rain." Grandpa says, "That's a great idea." He goes to the drugstore and asks the pharmacist for a condom. "What size would you like?" asks the pharmacist. "Big enough to fit a camel." A Mexican, an Asian, and an American are on a boat. The captain gets on the horn and says, "We are sinking. Quick, throw everything we don't need overboard." The Mexican throws all his sacks of beans overboard. The captain asks, "Why did you toss that?" The Mexican says, "In my country, we have a lot of this." The Asian man throws all the rice overboard. The captain asks, "Why did you toss that?" The Asian says, "In my country, we have a lot of this." The American thinks for a second, then he picks up the Mexican and tosses him overboard. The captain yells, "Why did you throw him overboard?" The American says, "Well, in my country, we have a lot of this." My wife and I were woken up at 3 a.m. by loud banging on our door. I got up, opened the door, and there was a drunken stranger standing in the pouring rain asking for a push. "Are you insane, man? It's 3 in the morning!" I screamed, slamming the door and stormed back to bed. "Who was that?" asked my wife. "Just some drunk asking for a push," I grumbled. "Did you help him?" she asked. "No, I did not. It's 3 a.m. and it's pouring rain." "Well, you've a short memory," she said. "Don't you remember 3 months ago when we broke down and those two guys helped us? You should be ashamed of yourself. Now get out there and help him." She had a point, and angrily I got dressed and went out into the darkness, calling out, "Hello, are you still there?" "Yes." "Do you still need a push?" "Yes, please." "Where are you?" "Over here, on the swing." Jane and Roy had been married for 40 years. They lived frugally and never had any children. Everything they owned was paid for. Roy kept all of his money in cash at home. He always talked about how he was going to take his money with him when he died, always saying he wanted all of his money put into his casket with him when he died. When the day came, Jane was the grieving bride. At his viewing, all of their friends and neighbors came to wish her well and pay their respects. Right before they closed the casket, Jane walked up to the casket, whispered some words, and put an envelope into Roy's jacket. Her friend asked her what that was about. Jane reminded her of what Roy always said he wanted: all of his money in his casket with him. Jane rounded up the money, put it into her checking account, and wrote Roy a check for every last penny. A man brings his best buddy home for dinner unannounced at 6:30 p.m. after work. His wife screams at him while his friend sits and listens in. "My hair and makeup are not done. The house is a mess. The dishes are not done. I am still in my pajamas and I can't be bothered with cooking tonight. Why the heck did you bring him home?" Calmly, the husband replies, "Because he's thinking of getting married and I promised him a demo." In the wee hours of the morning, a wife is woken up by the sound of the door, signaling the return home of her husband. She lies in bed listening to the thuds of his feet slowly making their way up the stairs. They get to the doorway and stop. The wife looks up and sees her husband carrying a sheep. Angry at him for waking her up, she yells, "Do you have any idea what time it is? And what is that thing doing here?" The husband, wobbly, leans against the door frame and says, "This is the pig I've been screwing for the past 5 years." His wife shakes her head in part anger and part disgust and says, "You drunk idiot, that's a sheep." The husband, looking slightly annoyed, responds, "I wasn't talking to you." A professor travels to Africa to live with a primitive tribe and spends years with them, teaching them all about the wonders of science, mathematics, and formatting Reddit comments so they get the most upvotes. One day, the chief's wife gives birth to a white child. The word spreads, and the entire tribe is in shock. The chief pulls the professor aside and says, "Look, you're the only white man we've ever seen around here, and this woman just gave birth to a white child. It doesn't take a genius to figure out what happened." The professor replied, "No, Chief, you're mistaken. What you have here is a natural occurrence, what we in the civilized world call an albino. Look at that field over there. All of the sheep are white except for one black one. Nature does this on occasion." The chief was silent for a moment, then said, "Tell you what. You don't say anything more about that sheep, and I won't say anything more about that white child." After God created Adam, Adam came to God and said, "You created all the animals, and each one has a mate, but I'm alone. Can you create me one also?" God replied, "Well, Adam, I can create a mate for you. It will be the crown of my creation, someone who will serve you and your every need and desire. The most beautiful and loving creature. She will take care of you always and give you all the respect that is deserving of you. The only thing is, it will cost you an arm and a leg." Adam thought for a second and said, "What do you have for a rib?" Man is sitting in a bar staring at a shot glass while a bartender cleans the table. Suddenly, a biker sits next to the man, grabs the shot and drinks it in one gulp before slamming the glass back in front of the man. The man stares at the glass for a second before bursting into hysterical sobs. Both the bartender and the biker stare at the man in surprise. The bartender quickly tries to calm the crying man. "Hey, I can get you a new drink if it meant so much to you." The man looks at the bartender with tear-filled eyes before speaking. "It's not that. I've just had a horrible last week. First, my wife left me for this rich douchebag, then my parents died in a car crash. To crown it all, my home burned down with everything I own the next day." He lets out a small sob before continuing. "And now that I was finally determined to end it all, this asshole biker comes and drinks the poison I had prepared." A man asks a farmer if he can work for a night's lodging and a meal. Farmer gets a knock on his door. It's a man in his mid-30s who looks like he's been traveling a while. The man asks if he could earn a meal and a place to stay for the night. "Do you have any skills?" the farmer asks. "Well, I do have a rare gift. I can communicate with animals." "Sure you can," the farmer says. "But I like your style. I'll put you to work." So the man does a few chores around the farm and earns his meal. At dinner, he says to the farmer, "I know you don't believe me, but I actually do communicate with animals. I can prove it. I spoke to the hens and they said you were there every morning before dawn to collect their eggs, and you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed." The farmer says, "Wow, that's exactly right." The man continues, "I spoke to your cow, and she said you've faithfully milked her every day before dawn, and you've been doing so every day for years since your wife passed." The farmer says, "I'm amazed. That's true." The man says, "And I spoke to your sheep." "That sheep's a fucking liar." 3 men go before the Queen to be rewarded for their service. 3 British soldiers gruesomely wounded in Afghanistan meet the Queen, who wishes to reward them for their loyal service. The first soldier is in a wheelchair. He has very long arms. The Queen takes one look at him and says, Measure this man from fingertip to fingertip and pay him 1,000 pounds for every inch. The man stretches out his arms as wide as he can. The royal tailor measures him and they pay him 72,000 pounds. The second soldier is blind. He has extraordinarily long legs. The queen takes one look at him and says, "Measure this man from his head to his toes and pay him 1,000 pounds for every inch." The royal tailor measures him and they pay him 76,000 pounds. The third man looks perfectly healthy and absolutely average in every way. The queen says, "And you, sir, how would you like to be compensated?" The man says, "From the tip of my penis to the base of my testicles, Your Majesty." The queen arches an eyebrow, and her eyes twinkle in amusement. "Very well. Measure this man from the tip of his penis to the base of his testicles, and pay him 1,000 pounds for every inch." The royal tailor squats in front of the man and arranges his tape measure, but then he stops. "Where are your testicles?" "Last time I saw them, Afghanistan." After 20 years of marriage, a couple was lying in bed one evening when the wife felt her husband begin to touch her in ways he hadn't in quite some time. It almost tickled as his fingers started at her neck and then began moving down past the small of her back. He then slid his hand across her shoulders and neck, slowly worked it down one side, then the other, stopping just over her lower stomach. He then proceeded to place his hand on her left inner arm, caressed downward again, working down her side, passed gently over, and then in between her buttock and down her leg to her calf. Then he proceeded up her inner thigh, stopping just at the uppermost portion of her leg. He continued in the same manner on her right side, then suddenly stopped, rolled over, and became silent. As she had become quite aroused by this caressing, she asked in a loving voice, "That was wonderful. Why did you stop?" "I found the remote," he said.